A very important and slightly alarming development has taken place in the Asia-Pacific region. The U.S. Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, while speaking at the prestigious Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore, called China an imminent threat to Taiwan. So what exactly is the Shangri-La Dialogue? Is China really preparing to attack Taiwan? In today's video, I'll answer all these questions. Let's start with the Shangri-La Dialogue. Well, in simple terms, the Shangri-La Dialogue is an annual high-level security summit where top defense officials and military leaders from Asia, Europe, and the United States come together. It's a platform where major powers present their vision for regional peace and security. And this year, the event is being hosted by Singapore. The U.S. sent one of its largest ever delegations, but China, interestingly, sent a relatively low-level delegation and even canceled its planned speech, which is pretty unusual. But anyway, now let's talk about what U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth actually said in his Shangri-La speech. Well, Pete Hegseth described China as a power seeking hegemony, aiming to dominate the Indo-Pacific region. He pointed out that China is building up its military capabilities, training daily, and potentially preparing for an invasion of Taiwan by 2027. And here's a short clip of that moment. Please watch.
We will stand with you and work alongside you to deter Chinese aggression. Each day, together, creating more and more dilemmas and complications should China want to act. Should they decide to overturn the status quo? More dilemmas, more complications, more questions, more concerns, more variables, more reasons to say it's not worth it. No one should doubt America's commitment to our Indo-Pacific allies and partners. We will continue to wrap our arms around our friends and find new ways to work together, not only our treaty allies here, but also our key defense partners in ASEAN and across the Indo-Pacific.
Now, the recently published Worldwide Threat Assessment Report by the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency also suggests that China will be prepared to attack Taiwan by 2027. So this is no longer a question of if China will attack Taiwan, but when China will attack Taiwan. Pete Hegseth strictly warned that any attempt by China to forcibly take Taiwan would have devastating consequences for the Indo-Pacific and the world. But China, of course, outright rejected that narrative. In response to Hegseth's speech, the Chinese embassy in Singapore issued a sharp statement, calling the U.S. the biggest troublemaker in the region. They accused the U.S. of deploying offensive weapons in the South China Sea and conducting reconnaissance over Chinese islands and reefs. And to be very honest, China right now is feeling very frustrated with all the things the U.S. is doing to them. Meanwhile, Mr. Nice Guy, President Trump, is absolutely livid with China. In a dramatic escalation, the U.S. administration recently announced a sweeping move. All Chinese students studying or working in the United States will be deported. Yes, even those in critical sectors like science, engineering, and education. They're being sent back. And it doesn't stop there. The U.S. government has gone even further, stating that if any Chinese American, second, third, or even fourth generation is found to have links to the Chinese Communist Party, they too could be deported back to China. Even if it's just a great-grandfather or a distant family member with past ties to the CCP, it could spell serious trouble. And as if that wasn't enough controversy, there's now a heated debate in the U.S. over a burning question. Is Xi Jinping's own daughter secretly living in America? That's a topic so sensitive, it deserves its own video. Right now, Beijing is pointing fingers directly at Washington, accusing the U.S. of playing with fire through military maneuvers, tightening alliances, and so-called freedom of navigation operations that China claims are destabilizing the entire region. And while both sides accuse each other of fueling the flames, the underlying reality is that China's growing military and economic power has reshaped the balance of power in Asia. Pete Hegseth's message to Asian nations is very clear. Be partners, not dependents. Step up your defense spending. He compared Asia's response to the China threat to Europe's defense spending in the face of Russia. If European nations can ramp up their defense budgets, so should countries like Japan, South Korea, and India, especially in the face of China's growing assertiveness. But here's where it gets tricky. The U.S. wants a strong shield of deterrence. But at what cost? Increasing defense spending, as Pete Hegseth suggests, doesn't come cheap. And while he advocates for partnerships, there's a growing sense of pressure among U.S. allies. Some, like Japan, are on board, but others are more cautious. Countries like South Korea and Taiwan have long struggled with this pressure. They want to bolster their defense, but don't want to escalate tensions with China unnecessarily. And then there's the reality of economics. Many nations rely heavily on China as a trading partner. So, how do you balance defense with economic cooperation? Pete Hegseth's call for partners, not dependence, may sound empowering, but for many in Asia, this could feel more like a demand. And it raises a key question. Will countries like India, Japan, and others invest more heavily in their defense, or will they continue to hedge their bets on diplomacy with China? Now, here's something crucial to consider. Perceptions in Asia about China's rise are not uniform. Unlike Europe's fear of Russia, many Asian nations have a more sanguine view of China. They recognize the challenge posed by China, especially in the South China Sea, but they also acknowledge China as a key economic partner. Asian governments, particularly in Southeast Asia, are more willing to work with China on trade, infrastructure, and development, despite territorial disputes. For example, Japan's largest trading partner is China, with total trade of more than $300 billion. South Korea's largest trading partner? Also China. Indonesia? Again, China. India depends heavily on China for electronics and other essential goods. Last month, China, Japan, and South Korea agreed to boost trade cooperation in response to President Trump's tariffs. And to surprise you even more, Taiwan's main trading partner is also China. So clearly, this makes the U.S.'s hardline stance tricky to sell, particularly when it might push countries into making a choice between Washington and Beijing. So, what does this all mean for the future? Will the U.S. and China find a way to de-escalate tensions? Or is the U.S. headed for an inevitable confrontation over Taiwan? The situation is fluid, and every move will be carefully watched by the international community. In the end, Taiwan isn't just a flashpoint between two superpowers. It's a symbol of the broader struggle for influence in the Indo-Pacific. And as much as we'd like to believe that conflict can be avoided, the stakes are too high for anyone to ignore. Do you think this imminent threat is real? Or are we just witnessing more geopolitical theater?